Dinner was served in the main dining room, a long high ceiling space with dark timber beams, and a table that seated 12 comfortably. Tonight it held 7. Candelabras burned at intervals down the center, silver cutlery engraved with a thorn motif. Edwin and 2 additional staff moved silently between courses. Neither one of them made eye contact with any of us. Ethan sat at the head of the table, Isabella at the far end, the rest of us in between. The mystery woman was seated directly across from me. Ethan introduced her just before we sat down. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet Vivian Carr." "Hello, everyone," she said. Everyone just nodded, gave her a polite hello, and we began eating. The food was amazing. Mushroom bisque, brack of lamb, a red wine I didn't recognize but knew I couldn't afford. Ethan guided the conversation effortlessly. Daniel talked about the gym, Olivia about her work, April filled in gaps when things got quiet, and Thomas spoke only when spoken to, and Vivian barely spoke at all, but she watched, constantly. "So, Vivian, how did you and Ethan meet?" Olivia asked. Vivian set her fork down carefully. "Through work," she said. "What kind of work?" Olivia asked. "Consulting." "What kind of consulting?" Vivian looked at her. "The kind that requires discretion," she said. Ethan smiled lightly from the head of the table. She's just being modest. Vivian handles documentation of some of my more complicated projects." "Documentation of what?" Thomas asked quietly. Ethan glanced at him. "Old things." Thomas held his gaze for a moment and then went back to his plate. I kept my eyes on my plate and told myself the food was exceptional. It was. And then Ethan set his fork down. The sound of it against the china was small and precise. And the room shifted. "So, I've been thinking about something lately," Ethan said. His tone was still warm, still measured, but something underneath it had changed. The way a road changes when the surface looks the same but the ground beneath it had gone soft. April glanced at him. Daniel didn't look up. "Time," Ethan continued. "What it actually does. People assume it heals things." A pause. "I think that's wrong. I think time just creates distance, and distance is easy to confuse for peace." Olivia set her glass down slowly. "Senior year," Ethan said. No preamble, no easing into it, just those 2 words, placed into the center of the table like something heavy he had been carrying a long time and had finally decided to put down. Daniel let out a short exhale, half laugh, half something that had no clean name. "Great, there it is," he said. "Daniel, come on," April started. "No, I mean, we were all thinking it. Might as well stop pretending otherwise," he said. Ethan kept his eyes forward. His expression didn't shift. "That's why I asked you all here. I'm not interested in pretending it didn't happen," he said. Thomas leaned back in his chair, one hand resting flat on the table. The posture of a man who was very still because he chose to be. "Closure," Thomas said. Not a question, not agreement, just the word, held up at the light. "Yes," Ethan said. Thomas studied him for a long moment. "Interesting word for it," he said. April leaned forward slightly. "I think if we approach this calmly before she was interrupted, without turning into what it already was," Daniel said, interrupting her. "Let her finish," Olivia said. No, it's fine," April said. Ethan looked around the table slowly, and for once, just briefly, the performance slipped. Something underneath it was more careful this time, more exposed. "I made decisions back then that I know not everyone agreed with," he said. "I'm here because I think we've all been carrying something that we didn't have to keep carrying alone." Thomas tilted his head. "That's one way to phrase it," he said. "It's how I phrase it," Ethan said. "I did what was necessary." Thomas looked at him steadily across the length of the table. "Necessary for who?" he said. "For all of us," Ethan said. Thomas smiled then, not warmly, not with amusement, with the specific expression of a man who has waited long enough for a particular conversation and is entirely unsurprised by how it's beginning. "I don't remember being a part of that decision," Thomas said. April's fingers tightened around her wine glass. Vivian spoke. She hadn't shifted her posture, hadn't leaned in or done any of the things people do to signal they're about to speak. She simply spoke, and her voice moved through the tension without effort. like a blade through water. Yeah, that's the problem with decisions like that, she said. Everyone looked at her. She was looking at Ethan, and only Ethan. They only hold together for the people they were designed to protect, she said. Ethan studied her across the table. Something moved between his eyes. Not anger, something more considered than anger, more deliberate. I'm not sure I follow, he said. Her expression didn't change. Oh, you will, she said. Daniel set his glass down, nearly fed up. Okay, I'm sorry, but who exactly is she? Because we're having what is apparently a very significant conversation and she's just there. Who is she? Who are you? He said. Daniel, Ethan started. No, I'm not finished. He kept his eyes on Vivian. What I do know is that you've been sitting there all night, barely saying 2 words to anyone, just watching, taking it all in. And then the second things get real, you want to chime in with your little observations. He gestured vaguely. She's a guest, Ethan said. His voice had gone careful. The same as all of you, he said. She's not the same as all of us, Daniel said. We actually know why we're here. We have history in this room. She walked in off the street as far as I can tell, he said. I'm not trying to be rude. And for a moment, he almost sounded like he meant it. I'm just trying to understand what's happening at this table tonight, because it feels like there's a conversation inside the conversation, and I'd like for someone just to be straight with me for once. So, who are you actually? The table went very still. Vivian looked at Daniel. She didn't flinch, then bristle, then reach for her wine glass or break eye contact, or do any of the things a person does when they feel cornered. She just looked at him, with patience that was somehow more unsettling than any response she could have given. Daniel, Olivia's voice came in, even and measured. Let Ethan explain, she said. She's here because I asked her to be here, Ethan said. Daniel leaned back, looked at the ceiling briefly, and then back at Vivian. So you got nothing to say? He said. Vivian held his gaze for one more moment, and then she picked up her wine glass, took a slow sip, and said absolutely nothing, which was somehow the most unnerving response she could have given. April placed her hand slightly on Daniel's arm. Daniel, let it go. He looked at her hand and then at her face. Something in him deciding. He exhaled, reached for his own glass. Fine, okay, whatever, he said. The table released a collective breath and hadn't realized it was holding. Ethan lifted his glass. To old friends, he said, attempting to recover the evening's earlier register. And to honesty. Glasses lifted around the table, reluctantly, unevenly. To closure. The glasses touched, crystal rang against crystal, and outside, the storm arrived. Not gradually, not with the polite warning of distant thunder first. It arrived the way bad things sometimes do, all at once and without apology. Rain hammering the windows like it had just been waiting just beyond the glass for exactly this moment. Lightning split the sky, and for 1/2 a second, the curtains lit up white, and the entire room existed in 2 states simultaneously. The warm amber of the candlelight and the cold, flat white of the storm. And in a frozen half second, I looked around the room, without meaning to. And then that's when the chandelier died. Complete darkness. The candelabras on the table guttered on the sudden displacement of air and threw wild shadows for one lurching second before they too went out. Someone inhaled sharply. What the hell? Daniel said. Stay where you are, don't panic. Ethan's voice came in, controlled by effort. Edwin? Isabella called out. Lightning strobed through the curtains, 1/2 second of white. I saw the table, the glasses, the faces. Thunder swallowed the light. Darkness again. Marcus? April's hand found my arm in the black. I'm here, I said. Everyone stay seated, Ethan said. Edwin will have the backup. A door somewhere in the house, footsteps in the corner, and then the warm, unsteady glow of a lamp appeared in the doorway. Edwin, expression composed as always. As though power failures during dinner parties were a routine inconvenience he had long since accounted for. Light returned, amber, restless, casting everything in slightly the wrong proportions. The storm pressed against the windows. We looked at each other. It was Ethan, Isabella, Thomas, Daniel, Olivia, and April. I counted, and then counted again. The chair at the far end of the table, empty. Wine glass still full. Napkin folded across the seat, with the place card still standing, as though she had simply ceased to exist. Between one heartbeat and the next. "Where's Vivian?" Olivia said. The question landed in the room like a stone dropped into still water. Everyone looked at the empty chair. Nobody moved for a moment. "She was just here," Daniel started. He looked at the seat, then at the space around it, and then at the door. "She was right there," he said again. "Edwin, did you see Miss Vivian leave the room?" Ethan said. Edwin stood very still. "I did not, sir." Ethan looked at the empty chair. Isabella spoke from the doorway, her voice precise and even. Perhaps the storm frightened her? Or she may have simply stepped out, she said. "She didn't say anything," April said. "She didn't excuse herself. She was just there and then she just stopped," she said. Daniel stood up, walked to the empty chair, looked at it the way you look at something that shouldn't be possible. He didn't finish, because there was nothing to finish it with. Thomas hadn't moved from his seat. He was looking at the empty chair from across the table, with an expression that wasn't alarm, it wasn't confusion. It was something that I didn't have a name for yet. Something that almost looked like recognition. "Thomas," I said. He looked at me. "Did you see her go at all?" A pause. The storm filled the silence outside. "No," he said. But the pause, that half-second pause, it set in the wrong place. Ethan set his wine glass down with a deliberate click. "Edwin," he said, "go check the house." "Of course, sir," Edwin said. Isabella moved with him. The rest of us stayed at the table, and the amber lamplight with the storm outside and the empty chair at the end of the table, and the full wine glass catching the light like a small, still unanswered question. Daniel looked at me across the table. I looked back at him. Neither one of us said what we were thinking, because what we were thinking didn't have clean edges yet. It was just a feeling. I was watching the empty doorway where Edwin and Isabella had gone when it happened, and then that's when I heard something. Not a creak, not the soft click of a latch catching. It was a door slamming. Hard and sudden and deliberate. The sound traveling through the walls and the floors and arriving in the dining room like a declaration. April's hands moved up to my arm. Olivia looked up sharply. Daniel spun towards the door. What the hell was that?" he said. We listened. The storm outside, the candles, our own breathing, nothing else. No footsteps following the sound, no voice calling out, no second sound of any kind, just the one door in the deep interior of the house making itself known and then going silent, again like it had said everything it needed to say. Daniel looked at me. "That came from upstairs," he said. "Or the east wing," Thomas said quietly. "The east wing is locked," April said. Thomas looked at her and said nothing, which was its own answer. Olivia set her pen down very carefully on the table. Should we?" she started. "No," I said. Everyone looked at me. Edwin and Isabella are already looking, I said. "We stay here, together, until they come back." A beat. And then April said, "Marcus is right, nobody moves." And then that's when Daniel looked at Ethan with his arms crossed. "You want to tell us what's going on?" he said. Ethan met his gaze. "I don't know," he said. And for the first time all evening, it was the only thing he had said that sounded completely, unmistakably true, which somehow made everything worse.